Welcome back to another episode of the Block Runner Podcast. I'm your host, William, always here with your co-host, Ivan.
What's going on, dude?
And on the sticks, we got TJ.
Hello.
And joining us today, we got Doug and Mati from Quantum Expeditions. Thank you for joining us, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, so Doug and Mati, I don't know, we did a Twitter space several months ago on, so we joined your Twitter space, I believe, Quantum Expeditions, and we were talking about the Bitcoin mining and security budget stuff, but I want to understand a little bit more about each of your backgrounds and a little bit more about your business. So let's start with Doug, and then we'll go to Mati here.
Well, yeah, I'm Doug Harwick. I'm an oil and gas guy going back about 2.5 decades now. And that's kind of how I got introduced to Mati. I got a call one day, and they asked if I knew where to find stranded gas. And this has been a number of years ago, about 5 years ago. And I said, well, I don't have it, but I know where to get it. And then I found out that they needed this gas to mine Bitcoin. I'm like, what's mining Bitcoin?
Yeah.
So, you know, I've really come down an interesting path. Matter of fact, it was just months earlier that a friend of mine, I went to him because I had read a white paper from IBM about blockchain technology. That was 2018. And I really didn't, think much about it other than, man, I wish I could figure out how to put mineral properties on the blockchain. That would be cool. And so it's been, noodling in the back of my mind all these years. And then Mati and Oz give me a call and ask me about stranded gas. And I'm like, well, we can find some. And the guy that told me about cryptocurrency, he said, but whatever you do, just stay away from Bitcoin. Like, okay, I didn't know.
What year was this?
So this was in 2020.
Okay.
And yeah, and it was at the end of 2020, I believe it was, Mati, or was it 21, that you called me up, you and Oz called.
Yeah, that's right.
It's been years. And so they called me up wanting that. And so all of a sudden I'm conversing with his guys just to get them gas because they're doing Bitcoin, and that's, a big no-no. But the more I learned about Bitcoin, the more I got hooked. And before you know it, they orange pilled me hard, which was pretty cool. And I really haven't looked back since. And I still have, a few cryptos that I use. I got into NFTs and ordinals, and but at the end of the day, I'm more of a Bitcoin guy than anything else.
Sure.
But I'm just an old oil and gas guy that's learning new technology and learning all these things that I would have never guessed I'd be in this position, just a few years ago. So we, through the relationships I had, we were able to get plugged in on a small 0.5 megawatt on grid. We started mining, and we knew eventually we wanted to get off grid and get into that, the NAT, the stranded gas, stranded energy application, if you will, because we knew that's going to be the long-term play. And it seems the longer we do this, the more confirmation we have that stranded energy is the place to be. And we're also learning, especially with the advent of all these new AI data centers, how fragile the grid system is. Mm-hmm. And so, everything that we've done to this date, it seems like the more we progress, the more solid we are in our conviction, the more evidence that we can obtain that we're going in the right direction, which is really exciting. And, Mati and I, he's like my brother now. We've grown so close, and I respect him so much. And the crypto, the blockchain, the Web3 in general community, they love Mati because he's the right kind of guy that we wish everybody in this Web3 space, these spaces, I guess, Web3 spaces. I wish everybody was more like Mati, and we wouldn't have so many bad actors, taking advantage of people.
Sure.
And running projects all over the place. So, I'm really proud of the relationship and what we've built. It's taken longer than expected because, things change. But the more things change, the more we're committed to what we're all about. So, we're a Bitcoin mining company, and we can talk, I guess, more about technology and things and what we're looking forward to in the near future later on.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Doug. All right, Mati, let's get your background.
Sure, but first, I want to flip the script on you. You said that you were on our Twitter Spaces, but I apologize. I don't know who you are or which project we talked about. Can you remind me your handle, and then I can get some frame of reference?
Yeah, so when we joined the Twitter space, we joined as the block runner. And at the time, we were talking about this particular token called NAT. And so we joined the conversation, and we probably talked about NAT, which was probably the last 10 to 15 minutes of the conversation. So we didn't really get deep into it, and I remember us wanting to come back to go, a little bit more deeper into the conversation. So I don't know if Mati, you were part of that conversation or Doug was. Yeah, I don't remember either.
I absolutely remember that conversation. I thought that it was quite interesting the way that NAT is subsidizing miner rewards. I had fundamental questions about the tokenomics, but generally like the spirit of the community, which sometimes that's all that matters. I mean, there are plenty of layer ones out there, even from the olden days, that are still going strong because the community is strong, and not necessarily because the technology is so revolutionary.
Yeah, so I do want to talk about NAT, but we'll leave it till towards the middle or towards the end.
And you guys are welcome back on the spaces anytime. We're doing them 2-3 times a day. So you can just come to our website at kiwi.finance. You'll see the full schedule there under the conversations tab. And yeah, you're welcome. I host the Thursday ones. So we just did that about an hour or two ago, and we had some interesting builders on. But yeah, hi, my name is Mati Greenspan. I am the founder and CEO of Quantum Economics, which is a community of builders, investors, and content creators working on the future of finance to make it more free and fair for everybody. Quantum Expeditions is our Bitcoin mining company that Doug was talking about. Doug is the CEO, and I'm the Chief Financial Officer of Quantum Expeditions, with the mission to utilize stranded gas, which is basically natural gas that comes out when they're drilling for crude oil, and they get the natural gas and they can't do anything with it. It's not valuable enough to sell, so they actually just burn it into the atmosphere. It's bad for the environment, and it's wasteful. Approximately $120 billion worth of natural gas is burned or vented every year in Texas alone.
Wow.
And so our mission is to monetize that by feeding it into a generator and mining Bitcoin.
Wow, that's crazy. So a little bit of my background. So in a previous life, I had a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering, and I did spend about 5 to 7 years in the oil and gas industry, and then that's when I pivoted to crypto, just because it just captured my attention. So I know a little bit about what you guys are doing, and you're right. Burning $120 billion worth of gas is definitely a waste of value. So applying that to something like mining Bitcoin is like a pretty smart move. So shout out to you guys for recognizing that opportunity.
So what's the issue with whatever's being produced in excess from this oil process? Like, how come that gas can't be captured and utilized, because that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
If the option is to just burn it, there must be some sort of like I don't know, process that just isn't logistically worth the time or the money, right? So can you kind of break that down? Like, why are these companies even doing that?
You bet. Yeah, if you've ever driven through an area where there's a bunch of oil wells and you see that thing they call a pump jack going up and down,
Yeah.
and then nearby you'll see a flame. Well, that flame is burning off natural gas, the extra natural gas. And the challenge that we have in the United States, which is pretty rare, is that we have more natural gas being produced than we have takeaway capacity to get it to market. And the challenge with natural gas is, when they produce that oil, they can just put it on a truck and haul it off. But with natural gas, they have to put it into a pipeline, which sounds easy, but you have to, first you have to get permits, and then you have to get easements, and then you have to drill or dig the tunnels or trenches and lay the pipe. And I mean, there's a whole infrastructure that needs to be done.
Yeah.
As well as transmission stations and treatment plants and all those things along the way. So to transport natural gas requires tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And so in order to make it worth their while to build something that big and expensive, is they have to go to the oil companies and get a commitment to sell the gas to this pipeline company. So between logistics and expenses, it makes it very, very difficult.
I see.
So now what happens is we get all that extra gas at the wellhead. There's only two things you can do with it. If you don't have a place to sell it, you can either vent it, which is just shoving methane into the atmosphere, which is bad, or it's putting it through a pipe that burns it off, which emits a lot of emissions. And so what we do is we can take natural gas and put it through an on-site treatment and then run that into a natural gas engine that spins a electric generator and make energy right there on site. And then we bring in a container full of miners, plug it all together, and next thing you know, you're mining Bitcoin. Because with Bitcoin, the internet connectivity can be as simple as a cell phone data. So it takes very little bandwidth for mining Bitcoin. Whereas like AI data centers, you need duplicate fiber optic connectivity to the internet, which is terribly expensive as well. And so, the lowest hanging fruit to convert or to use that energy on site is actually mining Bitcoin.
So I'm curious, you said that... I'm sorry, Marty. I just have a quick question. You mentioned that you needed a pipeline to get through the natural gas to its destination. So how do you get natural gas to the right destination when you're trying to mine Bitcoin?
So it's all on site.
Oh, it's on site. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, just bring the miners to the location where the gas is coming out, and then you mine Bitcoin there. Okay.
Yeah, instead of bringing the gas to the Bitcoin mining or the power plant, we're bringing the mining where the gas is and using it right there on site.
So logistically for the miners, do they have to adjust what they're used to is there a difference between mining typically versus mining using natural gas? It's like, what is the difference between what a miner has to do before with natural gas?
So that's one of the biggest challenges that most people haven't really addressed very well. And even today, after all these years, and Monty and I first met in Nashville about 2.5 years ago, and we were standing there in that Bitcoin conference, and we were talking with one of our investors, and a guy was walking by, and he goes, "Are you talking about mining Bitcoin with natural gas?" And we're like, "Yeah." And he's like, "I'm having all kinds of problems because most people think that you can just take the gas out of a well and shove it through a genset and start, connect it to your container and start mining. And there's a treatment that needs to be done. And the other thing, I was in the drilling, operating oil and gas. I've worked for oil and gas companies that operated oil wells. And so I know that each well is finicky. Each well has its own personality. Even wells that are side by side, they're different. And so you have to be prepared and understand that the gas that you have today, it might be different tomorrow. And so if you aren't prepared for that, and if you're don't have a game plan for changes, you're going to be caught with, on the back of your foot. One of someone we know very, very well, he manages an off-grid site for a company, and they're so reactive. And so what happens with them is they have a problem, and then they react to that problem and try to fix it, which costs a lot more money, and you've got a lot more downtime than if you had prepared properly in the first place. So mining Bitcoin isn't off-grid is not for everybody. Mining Bitcoin is not for everybody. Mining off-grid Bitcoin is for even fewer. And if you don't have a true oil and gas mentality on site that understands how to get that gas to the genset, because once it's making electricity, it's electricity. It doesn't matter if it's nuclear, coal, wind. Well, wind and solar is a little different, but those other types of energy generation really doesn't matter how it's made. Once you get that electricity plugged into your container, the miners, all they know is they're going to sit there and spin and make a little heat and connect to the internet.
Why is wind and solar a little bit different?
Well, because they're so intermittent.
I see.
Are you sure you want to go down that path? You're going to set Dog off. He's going to go for days.
So there's all kinds of conversions, with wind and solar to power AC systems.
I see. Okay.
So then, break down the, I guess, financials in regards to all this, right? Because there's got to be some sort of deal you got to make with these oil producers, right? Because I'm sure they want a cut of whatever's happening.
Yeah, they want some Bitcoin too, right?
Or do you have to sell the Bitcoin? Maybe they don't want Bitcoin. Maybe they want, dollars.
Yeah.
And it is part of the upkeep here is like, you have a contract agreement and whatever Bitcoin you generate. How does it work, that side of things?
Well, without getting too deep into the weeds, one of the challenges, like on our first agreement with an oil and gas company, was they have they hire service companies, and you have to have certain type of insurance, and you have to sign certain agreements in order to get on their site. Well, the challenge is that we're not an oil and gas company. We're mining Bitcoin. We're just a container out there. And so we had to be overly insured. We had insurance that will never be used. But that was a requirement they have in their master service agreement, the MSA. And so if you understand oil and gas and oil and gas, the industry as a whole, it's just a good old boy network that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And that's been the biggest challenge, is getting you don't approach an oil and gas company as a Bitcoin mining company, because if you do, they don't know anything about it. Their eyes roll in the back of their head and they're like, oh, I don't have any idea what you're talking about. Go away.
Yep. And
so we've been very fortunate to have a connection with an oil and gas services company that actually manages the wells for these companies, that does the natural gas transportation and connectivity to the gen sets. And so they have a reputation of already doing all that. And they have all the insurance and they have all the crews, and, you know, they have to have certain types of clothing, hard hats and shoes. You know, you have to be a certain insurance and certain guidelines, and all of these things have to be in place for an oil and gas company to feel comfortable for you to be there. And so there's a lot more to taking natural gas from an oil well and converting it to electricity than just converting it. It's a lot easier said than done, I guess.
Sure.
When Doug says that we've been very fortunate, he means we worked really hard and did our research.
Right.
Okay, so so when your client base is essentially any oil and gas company that is burning gas, and you potentially would have the network to access, you know, the decision makers of those type companies, and then is it something that you sell post the build out of this plant, or is it something that's part of a build out of the plant?
So if I can jump in here, if you recall when Doug was explaining about, you know, those flames and the towers that, you know, burn gas and as they're operating, the thing is that they need to have a permit to do that.
Right.
And the permit allows them a set amount of how much they're allowed to burn. And the oil companies often get constrained with having just way too much gas, that it blocks them from, either they have to get a bigger permit, or it blocks them from producing the crude oil, which is what they really want to do. And so we're solving a real pain point for them, which is that we can come in and take that gas away from them, to utilize it in a way that's going to be less damaging for the environment. Now, obviously, these billion-dollar companies, they see us and they say, well, there's nothing these guys can't do that we can't do, right? So they're going to try and integrate it into their own work stack, rather than, you know, come and do an agreement with us. They've thrown us around the ringer more than a few times. Even though Doug's not a New Yorker that they want to they want to kick around, he speaks the language. He's from local boy and everything, and which is what they want to. They say they want to work with. At the end of the day, what they really want to do is they want to learn it and do it themselves. And what they don't realize is they can't. Doing this is something that requires. I mean, there's a lot of dead horses on this trail. Let's be straight. There's a lot of people who've literally tried this and failed. But that's where the biggest rewards are. If you've seen those dead horse trails, they're there for a reason, because there's gold at the other end.
That's right.
And doing this correctly requires the perfect combination of expertise between the crypto world and the oil and gas world and all of the other surrounding areas that I'm not going to go and elaborate on every single one. Suffice it to say that over the last 4 or 5 years, we've built up every single connection and every single partner, working with the best in class people and organizations at every layer of the operation. And so, you know, Doug mentioned a few of the partners that are on the supply side, a few of the partners that are on, you know, the insurance side, or, you know, all of these, you know, doing all of these things. And so it all comes together quite harmoniously, so that you understand that, there's the problem, that big prize, that $120 billion that's being wasted. And then there's that monetization layer. But every single piece in between has to be just right and planned out quite meticulously, which is exactly what we've done here.
Okay, so we because of the NAT token, we tend to do a lot of research on Bitcoin mining and the costs. And so the cost to mine a Bitcoin typically on average is around $70,000-$80,000. At least that's what they're telling us, right? So how much does it cost to mine a Bitcoin using your infrastructure?
Doug, you want to go? I mean, I'm not going to put a number on it, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things that we've done is you've got to get the biggest cost in mining should be your energy.
Yep.
And so that's what we've always focused on, is how can we lower our cost of energy. So then once you've got that piece, then it's, okay, I need equipment. And so let's go build some relationships there. And so now we have direct relationships with manufacturers for the gen sets, for the containers, all the things that it takes to put all these pieces together.
ASICs themselves.
The ASICs,
yeah. Yeah, and the ASICs. So now so in a previous life, in the I'll date myself here a little bit, but back in the late 80s and into the 90s, I was in technology. The little 286 and the Pentiums, and I was there for that. And one thing I learned is in technology is you better be ready to change, because it's going to change whether you're ready or not. And so with that mentality, and I've been through the ringer on that, and the dot bomb era is what got me out of technology and actually into oil and gas. But what I learned is we want to be on the cutting edge, but not the bleeding edge.
Sure.
And so by being on the cutting edge technology, what we're implementing is the new hydro cooling ASICs. So that way, one of the new things that really excited me, and when I saw that first rack come into our supplier, and I got to go literally physically see it before they even got the bubble wrap off, is that the new ones now, these new hydro rack mount systems, you could literally take a rack mount miner out and throw a rack mount AI system. So that got me thinking that, okay, this is a technology that I can grasp, because we've seen how nearly every large mining company has pivoted into AI.
Yep.
I've got my reasons, I think, why that happened. And I think in the long run, it's going to make our company stronger. Because while we can go in with the newest and latest and greatest technology of mining with, the lowest cost of energy, that's going to make us one of the most efficient companies, I think, in the industry. And that's what's going to set the stage to help our growth and our foundation to propel us into greatness, really.
Mm-hmm.
We can go down some other areas on that.
Yeah, so I guess the costs are essentially comparable, but your source of your resource is something that's being wasted anyway. So you're just taking advantage of that and bringing Bitcoin mining to a new client set that wouldn't otherwise be involved if it wasn't for you guys.
There are oil and gas companies that are selling natural gas to Bitcoin mining. It's not new. What sets us apart, I think, is the whole everything from point A to point B is an expertise in every segment of that whole supply chain. Sure. Of going from gas to Bitcoin. So we're taking molecules of natural gas and converting that into sats, right?
Yeah.
And so we're stacking sats on this side, but we're taking the natural gas on this. And that whole channel in between is by using the expertise of the people, the team, and also of the equipment, of having the best of class, the latest and greatest, the most efficient. That's what makes us, have the most efficient fleet in the industry.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, Maddie, or I'm sorry, Mati. The oil and gas industry. How do they take this approach to Bitcoin mining? Is this like something that they are open arms about, or open ears about, or do you have to really sell them on this like idea?
This is really a Doug question. Honestly, he's the one from the oil and gas industry.
Okay.
So that it goes back to what I was saying earlier. They don't know anything about it. They don't want to know anything about it in the most part. Now, what Marty was saying is these billion-dollar companies, they do want you out there because they've heard about it and they've got a pain. They've got all this gas. And for the most part, if they're burning more gas than they've got a permit to burn, that means they're paying fines on top of everything else.
Okay.
And that's not unusual in the oil and gas industry to pay a fine to flare more gas than you have a permit to flare. So
what I can say very emphatically is that they are a million times more receptive now than they were before Trump's second term. As soon as Trump spoke at the Bitcoin conference in Nashville, that was the same day the same time that Doug and I met face to face the first time. After like 3 years working together, when Trump endorsed Bitcoin and said that this nation is going to be a Bitcoin nation, and at the same time, the same platform said "drill, baby, drill."
That's right.
All of the oil companies heard that loud and clear.
Yeah.
And they went from shutting doors, and not just the oil companies, but everybody around them. The whole financial services, everything surrounding it became doors opened for us instantly from that. But I can't tell you how hard it was, even just to get a bank account when we first started.
Yeah.
They were asking us questions that didn't make any sense. And they just didn't know. They didn't understand the technology and were extremely hesitant. And as soon as, and from that day, literally that same day that Trump came and came to the Bitcoin conference, they were all ears, ready to learn, like school children showing up with their pencils and notebooks in hand and going, okay, how do we make money off this thing? And so, I mean, as far as the inner workings of the industry, I mean, I would say, Doug's from there. He knows that's literally why he's our CEO, because he can really speak the language and get it and speak with the executives of the companies and stuff like that. But my feeling is that they are going to try and do it themselves without us. I don't think that they're going to be able to nearly as well as us.
Yeah.
And we don't need them in order to do what we're doing. We've got suppliers who are independent, and they've got the correct supply of people, because again, it's abundant. It's literally an abundant source of energy that's already being burned, and so it's really a matter of, and I don't know if you watch these soccer games lately in the World Cup, right? Yeah. And it's like a whole strategy, right? And you got the defense, and you've got 7 guys lined up in front of the goal. The attacking team really needs to find that little crack in the defense, right? And as soon as they find that crack, then they just keep hammering it home until the goals start coming in. And that's really what it is with us dealing with the oil companies, is that they've got their defenses up. And for us, it's just, find that little one place that we can get the leak. And then once that happens, then the rest everything just falls into place. And I would say, learning, a lot about startups and what it takes to succeed in general. Don't give up. You just keep going. And we've had so many doors slammed in our face. It's not even funny. And we've had so many, Doug likes to use this metaphor, like we're walking down the hall, and then every time a door shuts on us, and then we're like, okay, let's keep going down the hall, and we find a bigger door, and a bigger door, and a bigger door. And that has been the journey of this company since inception,
Yeah.
and it keeps going that way.
I'm curious. When you talk to these plants, is there like a footprint requirement that has to be available in that plant for you guys to set up shop?
Well, we're not going to a plant. We're going out in the middle of nowhere,
Oh, I see.
out in the
Okay.
middle of a field where the oil wells are.
Yeah, because what I'm thinking about are like natural gas companies who produce these plants, LNG plants, and they have like this flare going, burning natural gas. So that's kind of what I have in my mind. So your clients are more like these oil and gas like companies that are basically in the middle of nowhere, that where you could set up shop and there's like infinite space.
Right.
Not our clients. Sorry, the clarification. Those are our suppliers.
The suppliers. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, they're supplying us natural gas. They're not our clients. That's the clarification I would make.
Okay. So I'm just trying to understand the business. So they are suppliers. So you are paying them for that natural gas instead of them just burning it.
Right.
Okay. Interesting. Did you have?
Yeah, I just
We're paying them for now, and
Mhm.
it's something that they would otherwise be burning. We had modeled it though at some point, and we had Gary Cardone on our Twitter Spaces at one point, and he says, eventually the cost of energy is going to go to zero. And it was so funny that when he said that, like, it wasn't like a light bulb went off. It was like our light bulb went off the day before he said that, because we had just modeled that exact scenario where we were on conversation with a specific company, and the deal on the table that we were discussing was they'll give us the gas for free. And so eventually that's where we're headed.
Yeah.
it definitely sounds like a killer edge.
That's what Elon says too, that energy will be abundant. It's just getting it.
Yeah, but it's I guess there's a matter of, incentives at this point, right? Because I think you, and along with all the other miners at the moment, like you mentioned, a large majority of them have already have made the AI pivot or are in process of doing so. But you guys are being a little bit more grounded to sticking to Bitcoin. Or you mentioned like there's a rack where you could transition between either or, right? In your systems. But the act of transitioning, whether it's like the simplest insertion of a new rack to like, service the AI network, like that is taking away from what it is you're contributing to Bitcoin no matter what, right? You can't have, you can't service both industries at the same time. Am I right in understanding that? So you have to make a choice no matter what. And if that's the case, you've made an active decision to essentially take less of a profit today, because I'm assuming servicing the AI industry, it has to be more profitable than servicing the Bitcoin network. And you're doing that as as a strategy, right? To position yourself for, let everybody else kind of like, trickle away and like, be pulled in to the gravity of the AI industry that it is today, in hopes that they're kind of like, that's kind of the whole game theory of Bitcoin in itself, right? It's like now you've just catapulted yourself way up the ladder. Am I right in understanding that? So just walk me through the strategy, and what are you observing from other miners in the Bitcoin network? Like, are they approaching it from a different philosophical perspective? Are they just looking for money? Do they care at all about Bitcoin in any of this? Or are you guys different from them in that aspect? Like, you actually have a genuine care for the asset itself. You called it gold because people who buy Bitcoin, they understand it to be the new digital gold, right? So is that where the allure stems for you guys?
So I think Monty and I are going to have different points of view, but of the same thing. And so my perception is that there's a lot of oil and gas companies, Bitcoin mining companies that were purists of Bitcoin mining just 2 or 3 years ago, or maybe 1 or 2 years ago. And now they're taking a hard right into, AI. And the thing is that, at the 60,000 foot level, if you're mining or you're AI, it's a data center. At the end of the day, they're both data centers.
Right.
And that's why a lot of these Bitcoin mining companies are now moving into AI, is because at the end of the day, it's still they're getting the electricity and converting it into something, whether it's compute or mining is also compute. So what I think is going to happen, and we've seen the difficulty of mining drop like 10% or more this year,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of that has to do with so many miners, their equipment is not profitable.
Yeah.
And you talked about the cost of mining being 70 or 80,000, and we're sitting at 60 to 70. That's not very profitable, right? So we've seen some of these public companies announcing how they were mining Bitcoin at this price, and then all of a sudden they're selling it. They sold $1 billion worth of Bitcoin or whatever it was for less than what it took to mine it.
Yeah.
But they needed cash. One company last year did a refinance of their debt. And so their cost to mine Bitcoin has just gone stratigraphic out of this world, right? They're not profitable mining Bitcoin. And so that's leaving a huge gaping hole for an efficient company that can mine Bitcoin, below, and make a profit at it. Now, is AI more profitable right now? Probably is. A lot of that has to do, with your cost of energy, and also the your overall operating costs. So in my opinion, I think where we are today, we're going to be the leanest, most efficient company that's going to be mining Bitcoin, and it's going to take up the slack of all the people that fall by the wayside. And I think there's a lot more hash rate that's going to come offline than go online, and that's where we're going to come in. And that's going to really help solidify us as a good, solid, big mining company. And then what could happen is, I go back to my technology years of the 80s and 90s. You remember dial-up modem,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then all of a sudden, we went to ISDN, and then we went to
Cable.
whatever it was. And then now we're fiber, right? And now we've got fiber at the house.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I think we're going to see with these wireless internet connectivity is, like, today we're still in the dial-up. Maybe we're not 9600 baud. Maybe we're 24.4. I remember all those stupid baud rate. The faster the bigger the number, the faster the modem. And so I think we're at that spot, but I don't think fiber or wireless connectivity has made it to that ISDN level, which is not even half as fast as where it's going to be in the near future. And I think that AI is going to help us get to that technology where Elon Musk is going to give us fiber optic through the air to the satellites.
Yeah.
And that's when our little containers out there in the middle of nowhere can connect to wireless fiber, bandwidth, if you will, and be able to convert containers to AI if needed. And I think that's going to be I think there's going to be more of a boutique AI suppliers, if you will, to smaller companies that they don't need, gigawatts worth of compute, that they may only need a half a megawatt or a megawatt worth of compute. Because remember, you're also going to see these AI machines get smaller but more powerful. we've got more power in a cell phone than a space shuttle, right? We've all heard that.
Yep.
And so I think we're going to see that in the LLM, the AI, HPC, data center rooms. I think we're going to have more compute in a smaller space. And by having that rack mount system, I think we'll be able to fit a bill, especially there are AI companies out there that don't want to share space with everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's going to be some real opportunities for the small, nimble data center companies, whether it's from Bitcoin to AI.
Yeah, Monty, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, as Doug mentioned, we're coming at this question from very different places, I think. Well, everybody said what they did in their previous life. In my previous life, I was a stock analyst, Forex and commodities and everything like that. And yeah, I had a lot of clients who would come in and say, hey, I want to know what's the spread, how much am I paying on each trade, and where's the support line, where's the resistance line, how do I get into the trade, how do I get out of the trade? That was never for me. My trading style is more directional.
Mm-hmm.
Gut check, go with my gut. Which way is it going? If it's going, just get in. Market order. There's no limit orders for me. So I really come to trust my instincts when it comes to these kind of things. And Bitcoin is one thing that as soon as I heard about it in 2013, March 2013, I immediately said, this is it. This is the money of the future. It was very clear as day to me. And I went and posted it on Facebook. I said, hey, everybody, the money of the future is here. And people were like, shut up, dude. Or it actually was a lot of apathy. Like people didn't even care or didn't see the potential. And I've come to really lean into that view, and it's been correct since then. I believe it even more now than ever. But what I've learned is a deeper understanding of how Bitcoin connects with energy, and that they have a symbiotic relationship. Mm-hmm. Particularly through our research, which led to the founding of this company, which was originated with, is Bitcoin bad for the environment? And that was a question that Elon Musk asked, a week before Elon Musk pulled the Bitcoin purchases for Teslas. I was on Bloomberg Television and they asked me that same question, is Bitcoin bad for the environment? I said, I don't know. And so we started researching it really deeply. And what we found was that actually Bitcoin is not just not bad for the environment, but it's actually very good for the environment. Because what it does is it incentivizes innovators like us to go ahead and search for cheaper, more reliable, renewable sources of energy. And, sorry about my kid screaming in the background there. And so we said, yeah, we looked at the pieces and we said, okay, we could do this. And so we founded the company. But then came along this AI wave, and we saw all these companies jumping on the bandwagon. And so we analyzed that just as we did with every other opportunity that's come our way. Is this good for us? Is this good for our investors? Is this good for the world at large and in general for the company? Is this the direction we want to go? And yes, it's something that we're keeping on the table. We're not saying, oh no, we'll never get into HPC. We're not like it's not that much. It's obviously this is a business, and our purpose here is to make money. But I'm going to go with my gut every single time, and my gut tells me that Bitcoin's requirement of energy is going to continue to grow over time. It's going to continue to say, okay, I need more and more energy to power the network.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't have that same conviction about AI. Faster models can come about, cheaper models can come about, different technology can come and change the game very quickly. Whereas Bitcoin is very predictable. it'll run the next 100 years on the same model that it's on right now. I mean, there'll be small upgrades once every few years for Bitcoin proposals, but all things considered, it's going to stay the same as it is. Whereas AI is just moving too fast to know what's going to be its energy draw in 10 years from now. But none of us know. They could come out with some super light computation models or much faster computation computers or quantum computing, which I'm waiting for with bated breath. It just changes the game as far as how much energy is needed to service a single prompt or whatever it is that you're doing with the AI. Whereas Bitcoin, for one transaction, we know is going to require incrementally more and more energy over time, not drastically this way or that way, but on a gradual incline, which is how it's been mapped out by Satoshi Nakamoto, who we say thanks to all the time.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think the analogy I like to use to describe exactly what you're saying, Mati, is Bitcoin acts more like a macrochip, which is the opposite of a microchip. Microchips, they get better when they get smaller, more power efficient, right? That's why we have a computer in our pockets that are more powerful than the thing that landed on the moon, right? It relies on deflationary technology, and Bitcoin operates on the opposite spectrum of that. It gets better when it gets bigger, more decentralized. It gets better when it gets more power hungry. That is more energy, therefore more security. And so your projection of it is exactly correct. It's going to consume more energy over time, and that's actually a good thing, because you're converting that energy into security. And if Bitcoin is the world's independent money, it needs to be equivalently secure. And really, that is the whole premise of the NAT token itself. So we got 10 more minutes. I think it's a good idea to talk about the NAT token. So the NAT token, like I said, it is there to support the Bitcoin miners, just because we understand the Bitcoin miners are the single most important thing in the ecosystem. If there are no Bitcoin miners, Bitcoin doesn't exist. And we all know that if we know the resiliency of Bitcoin, if all the miners completely shut down and there was one laptop on running the Bitcoin network, it would run the Bitcoin network. It would still hit 10-minute blocks, right? One laptop. And that would be fine, except that there's only one laptop, right? And so that one laptop would need to compete with one more laptop, and then you have a potential, problem there, right? So what we need is more computers, more decentralization in order for Bitcoin to remain as valuable as it is today and grow in value over time. And so the issue with this idea is that Satoshi had programmed this exponential decay that happens every single 4 years. And the only way to counteract this exponential decay is for Bitcoin to exponentially grow. And we've all seen the charts. Every single projection out there, from the rainbow chart to power laws, they all curve into the distance, and they kind of like level off, right? They asymptote, even though Bitcoin can grow forever, right? But it will not grow at an exponential rate. And so if you plot this out, if you assume power law is the truth and you just plot it out over time, you could see that the subsidy of Bitcoin ends up decaying away over time despite Bitcoin growing, but it doesn't grow exponentially. And so the NAT token is there as a second subsidy to supplement Bitcoin miners in the event that with enough time, or let's say low performance in Bitcoin's price, that Bitcoin miners can maintain the Bitcoin network in a more decentralized way to maintain the security. And then over time, it will allow for the additional energy requirements of Bitcoin to further increase the security of the network. So hopefully that gives you kind of like a rough understanding of what the NAT token is. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that, Mati.
I remember that from our conversation. I apologize. I do have a heart out at the top of the hour.
Sure.
So if you're giving us something for free, we'll take it. No problem with me. I don't think that we're going to hold it long term. We'll probably just sell it. this to me falls under the same category of it's an airdrop, and airdrops tend to be valuable as they're happening because they build a lot of hype around it. But long term, when you have a token that's sole design is as a reward mechanism, which means you're printing it or issuing it in order to give it to people for taking any specific action, but not to buy it, then you're going to have a very tough time weighting out the tokenomics in such a way that it incentivizes people to continue buying it long term. And so that's what we tend to see with airdrop tokens. I respect that you're trying to incentivize miners. Miners are already incentivized. If they weren't, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing. I mean, we do love the network and we do want to support it, but we need to make sure that we're making money doing it. Otherwise, it's not worthwhile. I wish success for your project, but I'd like to understand if there is some kind of long-term incentive for people to continue purchasing the token and what that gives them, other than the expectation that it might go up in value as the protocol continues to grow. I'm lacking that bit of utility, and that's what I told you guys on the space that time, and that's where I stand. Unless you come into our space in a week from now or in 2 weeks.
Yeah, let's do it.
Hey, this is how we want to answer that question, and I'm all ears. I'd love to hear it because I hope that you do.
Yeah, I mean, the way that we tend to look at it is more of like the tokenization of the security of Bitcoin, and so right now there's like, you know, a lot of the big miners supporting it, like Spiderpool, Ampool, and so forth. There's like 5 of the big miners supporting it. And I guess the idea is that if this thesis holds true, where Bitcoin doesn't exponentially grow forever, then the subsidy of Bitcoin goes to near zero, where it's becomes more centralized, right? There's only going to be Foundry left as miners, right? From a majority share standpoint, right? In this extreme scenario. And when there's only one big miner left, and that isn't sufficiently decentralized, and therefore becomes a problem for the confidence of the network, right? And so what we want is for people to be sufficiently incentivized so that even people with a house can just plug in, you know, one of the ASIC miners that they would buy and hopefully win the next block because the subsidy is good enough, right? A 10-minute lottery, if you will. And that's the idea, is that because we've tokenized the security of Bitcoin, then you could speculate that right now the security of Bitcoin is undervalued, therefore I'm going to buy a token. And then once it becomes overvalued, then they sell the token. And so we want miners to sell the token to actually pay the bills and continue supplying the network with additional security. So that's the whole idea behind it. So I know you got a hard stop here, Monty.
Yep. I appreciate it, man. Let's discuss it further on the spaces, because this is a super interesting thing for me, and so I would definitely love to explore this in a deeper level.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll hit you up on. I guess, do you have access to the Twitter account? I don't know who I'm speaking with on Quantum Expeditions Twitter account.
You can DM me directly.
Okay.
At Monty Greenspan.
Okay, I'll send you a DM and then we'll schedule it for hopefully next week.
Sounds good.
All right, Doug.
I'll be in Dubai next week. We'll have to do the week after.
Okay, that works. That works as well. All right, Doug. Thank you, Monty, for joining the Block Runner podcast. I appreciate you guys for joining. And for everyone else, all the links in the description will be at the description below. Again, thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you in the next podcast.
Peace.